I have only seen Herbie Hancock play live one time, and that was a very memorable event, although perhaps not for the reasons you might think. When I saw him, it was at a private event, a corporate event in Frankfurt, Germany. This was sometime in the 90s, I think, but I really can't remember the exact year. If by some freak of chance you know anything about this, or by an even freakier freak of chance you were there and can fill in any of the blanks, please do let me know down in the comments. Now, at the time, I was writing for a number of music magazines and computer magazines, and I used to go to the Frankfurt Music Mess, the Frankfurt Music Fair in Frankfurt, Germany, of course, to see what was new, to meet the manufacturers, to meet up with other writers, and we had a jolly good time, and we saw all the new stuff which was coming out and was about to be released. It was a wonderful event. Now, the Frankfurt Mess had halls the size of several football fields. They were filled with manufacturers from all sides of the music business: keyboards, synthesizers, pianos, music publishers. There was a section on lighting, on audio equipment, on PA. It was just mind-boggling in size, and everyone who was anyone was there showing their new products. Now, some of the big musical instrument manufacturers used to take some of their dealers and distributors out for meals in the evening, and we journalists, if we were lucky, we might manage to tag along to one or two of these. Now, many of these dinners were small, but some, and this one in particular, was a large corporate event run by Casio. Now, you may think of Casio as a manufacturer of these all-in-one, all-singing, all-dancing auto accompaniment keyboards, and of course that was and still is a very large part of their business. But you will also remember, I hope, they had some synthesizers as well, the Casio CZ range. I had a CZ 101 back in the day. I used to call it the poor man's DX7. It was cheaper, of course, it was smaller, and I did a lot of gigs with it. They also had the CZ3000, which Arturia emulated in their V collection. They also had a CZ5000 and the CZ1, which was the biggie. Casio was then and is now an absolutely gigantic company. So they had a corporate event at the Music Mess held in a posh hotel, and they invited the dealers and distributors along to give them dinner and to entertain them. And at each of these events they had a world famous musician to provide the entertainment. One year I remember they had Richard Claerman. Now, you may or may not know who he is, depending on the music you tended to listen to at your age, of course. He was often referred to as every mother's favourite piano player. He was French, he was young, he was good looking, and in case you're wondering, yes, he could really play the piano. However, on this particular evening, Herbie Hancock was providing the entertainment, and we saw on stage a couple of keyboards, so we thought, oh, there's going to be a duet of some sort. So Herbie came on along with another guy whose name I don't remember. If you know who he was or have any information about who he might have been, then please leave them in the comments. So Herbie came on stage with this guy, and they sat down at their keyboards, and Herbie started to play. Little bit more about that in a second, and so did the other guy. So Herbie was playing the keyboard, and this other guy put his hands on his keyboard, and it didn't produce synth sounds or keyboard sounds at all. He was actually triggering drum samples, and effectively he was using the keyboard to play the drums. Now, this was back in the 1990s, and such things, in my experience at all, had not really been a thing. We just didn't see this sort of thing happening, certainly not on stage. This was before the era of beatboxes or groove machines, of drum pads and so on. So this was really new, certainly to me, and innovative. Now, I was familiar with the principle of a keyboard containing a drum kit, the Yamaha SY77 contained several drum kits, and you could trigger the individual drums from the keyboard, so you could effectively play the keyboard like a drum kit. Hello, as I say, I hadn't seen anyone actually do this. Now, this was in the more slightly restrictive days of the 90s. We didn't really have the internet. We had to go to gigs to see live music. So this really wasn't at the fore of anyone's experience at the time. Now, I had used the SY77 to play in drum parts, but had never thought about playing it live. So anyway, so this guy has a keyboard, and he is just playing the most amazing drum patterns and drum grooves you have ever heard. And I have to say, for me and for many of my fellow journalists and writers who were sitting at this table and listening to this performance, he was more interesting, shall we say. The stuff he was doing on this keyboard, playing these drums, was as interesting, if not more interesting, than the stuff that Herbie Hancock was playing. Now, if we saw a performance like this today, I don't think anyone would think twice about it. There's a very good chance that whoever was playing the drums would possibly use a drum pad rather than the keyboard. But back in the day, this was really interesting and exciting. Now, one other thing of note, which if you were there, this may trigger a memory, I'm not sure. But within the first couple of bars, the first few notes that Herbie sat down to play, he hit a bum note. And it was so obviously a bum note that we sitting at the table just sort of turned around and looked at each other and thought, what's happening here? But he recovered and he played a fantastic set. I can't remember any of the songs he played or the tunes he played, but it was a really great night, and we were all very grateful to Casio for letting us share in this private performance. So that performance sticks in my mind, not just because I saw Herbie Hancock close to and playing his keyboard and doing his stuff, but also for the keyboard player playing the drums. Now, if you have any information about that, the year, the drummer, the hotel, I can't even remember the name of the hotel this event took place at. If you have any information, please leave it in the comments, because I would just like to top up my memory about that. And also, I guess if you have any memories of visiting the Frankfurt Music Mess or attending any of these corporate dinners, I'd be very interested to know about that too. The Frankfurt Music Mess stopped being a thing several years ago, and I had stopped going many years before that. But that still remains a very prominent memory. So I don't know if this is taking you down an alley somewhere down memory lane. It was just an interesting experience at the time. Let me know your thoughts and memories, of course. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you again in the next video.